Opening the door to Elliot's Law for another episode of When Black Men Talk. With this episode, Mr. DeMaurice and Mr. Charles are not going to be on tap. When they're not here, usually I invite in guests in and give them an opportunity to do some other things with their time, and that's what we're going to do with this episode. It's an episode that this gentleman was here not too long ago, and I wanted to get him back, and I want to get him back many more times, and this time he's going to be here today. But as I brought him back, I thought of this morning, and I thought of, walking a road. Sometimes we walk roads in life, and when you walk on that road, you get a little uneven. Yeah, so rocks there, you got potholes, and you start to say to yourself, why am I walking this? It's not paved. Why am I doing this? Sometimes you might even see a sign that says dead end, you may say stop, and you think to yourself, okay, I can't go any further. And you may want to start to pull up. At those times, you must pull into some fortitude and understand, no, you must keep going. If it's road there, keep traveling. I say that because this gentleman here traveled the road. He traveled the road where it got real rocky at some points. It got uneven. It had some blockage, and he just kept pursuing, and kept going forward to where he achieved the ultimate goal. And when the goal was achieved, basically he came back and paved the road, smoothed it out, took the signs down, put brand new lighting up so others can travel the road much easier and achieve the same goal. I'm talking about the paternity coach, the paternity advocate, one Carnell Smith. Good afternoon and welcome back to the show, sir. How you feeling?
Doing well, Mark. Hey, thanks for the invite, man. Love the intro. Love your energy. And most of all, I love how we're setting the stage for more men and boys and supporters of men and boys to be encouraged. And let's create some more advocates for men and boys.
Absolutely. I'm all about that. This time around, I wanted to go because sometimes I spoke of the unevenness of the road. Sometimes we start to travel and do some things and we come across opposition. We come across distractors. And when that happens, sometimes for some of us, that kind of take us off the road. It may set us aside for a little while and we may not push beyond. So I want to start this out. What were some of the distractors or what possible distractors that you might have been thinking about as you ventured on to becoming a paternity coach?
That's a very good question, Mark. In the in my initial, shall we say, forage into becoming an advocate, you got to understand that I myself was facing what these men and boys were facing and their families, and that was facing jail and prison. So along the way, you're going to encounter people who don't share your viewpoint, and especially in the area of legislative reform. Um, I was keenly aware that one of the things necessary to change the playing field and make it more even, to make it easier for men and boys who have been either lied to intentionally or accidentally lied to about the paternity of a child. And that guy now finds himself trapped by law and facing, years, decades of child support, going to jail, losing licenses, etc. I found it necessary to understand, why are these other groups and people opposed to changing the law so that these men and boys who've been falsely accused, and we can prove they've been falsely accused, how do we set them free? So I took a page out of Dr. Martin Luther King's playbook, and believe it or not, also Malcolm X, is that you need to listen to what the opposition is saying. Sometimes there's actual validity in what they say. And then there's sometimes that they are more of a thorn trying to keep you off mission. Because see, if you change the law so that when women and girls lie about paternity, as an example, that is like, this is one of like 4 to 5 major areas of false allegations against men and boys. Well, they want to keep things in such a way that if a woman or girl accuses the guy of causing her pregnancy, then he's presumed guilty because she said so. They don't want there to be any proof required. So now, because he is in a hole of being presumptively guilty, it is a huge hill for him to climb. So one of those groups, the National Organization of Women, several gay and lesbian women leagues, and several other feminist groups came out in opposition to us changing this law. And their position, Mark, is this. They said it would be unfair to the women for us to change these laws. And they started dancing around when we said, well, what about equal rights? What about equal accountability? What about equal accountability? Or are you strictly advocating for female supremacy and that we should just believe all women because they said so? And Mark, I'm vehemently opposed to accepting allegation and charges against men and boys without verifiable evidence.
Interesting enough, we wrestle against principalities and we wrestle against power. And I'm not surprised the feminist community kind of basically came with that stance. And it's interesting because the key word there is equality. I want to go back to where feminism kind of started because that word gets thrown around a lot. And for the most part, people just think, they're just kind of representing women. But when we think about it, it may not have started that way. It was movements and an ideology of a social theory aimed to achieve equality in all aspects of life. Through women experience, of course, identities and strength that should be respected. Now, this movement goes way back to 1848. Now, it has evolved over time. And lately, this is the interesting part about it, Carnell. Lately, the view is perceived to basically only benefit privileged white straight women. So you spoke of equality, for the most part, basically being a state of being equal. Now, if that's what they're really seeking, equality, that's where I'm thinking, why would they want equality across the board? But it seemed like they pick and choose when they want it, and they don't want it when it comes down to paternity. It doesn't seem as clear. When it comes down to paternity, that's a word that kind of runs out and they don't want to really deal with. Your reaction to it, sir?
I'd say you're spot on. I'm very fortunate that there are also honest women who are counter to the what we refer to as the third wave of feminist groups. Initially, it is my understanding the feminist group was started seeking parity and equality and equal treatment for women, such that they had equal opportunities and that they had equal rights and that they had equal status. And as long as that was the focus, they have no opposition from me. It is when the latest groups that seeks to downplay equality, being that women and girls have to be applied to same standards as men and boys. And I'll cite some examples here. For example, like in the area of paternity. All right, if we go with true equality, if that woman or girl points at a guy and says, that's who caused my pregnancy, his sperm fertilized my egg, and therefore that baby is his. And based on the window of conception, he is the only possible father. She should be willing to make those statements under oath, under penalties of perjury, and be backed up with some accountability on that. And then we should do the DNA paternity test. But those groups, the National Organization of Women, the Gay and Women's Lesbian League, and several other of the feminist groups, they expressed such negative opposition to that even a judge came out and said, no, you guys are trying to weaponize DNA testing against women. And I said, but Your Honor, you're supposed to be fair and an impartial arbiter who is a trier of fact and not trier of feelings. And if a DNA test reveals that her sworn statement that he was the only possible father, and that's the only person she was intimately involved with, and DNA results come back at 0% paternity, she has lied. That's not weaponizing DNA tests against women and girls. That is us saying we need to take it out of the hands of a group that is primarily going to respond emotionally. Because in my experience over 20 plus years is that when we ask the women and girls, who's the child's father, she tells me about what she feels. Well, I feel that, guy one is the father, and she may not even mention in most cases that there are 3, 4, or 22 other possibilities that could be the dad. Now, in my opinion, if we just do DNA testing at birth or at the 8th week of pregnancy for all of the allegations, whether they be single mothers, married mothers, teenage mothers, then we'll help the kid by getting facts on their birth certificate right in the beginning. And we'll give the man and the kid something that they don't get today. We'll give them a higher accurate probability of truth of who they're actually related to, what is their ancestry, who is actually responsible for their creation, and therefore who should have the responsibility for their support. That if we can make accurate determinations on those things in the beginning, then we will actually, using what we call the economy of scale, more tests will get done. And since it's an automated process, it'll drive down the cost of the test. We'll create more competition among the biosciences providers who provide these tests. And the overall cost of the testing can go down. And guess what else? We will reduce, if not eliminate, paternity fraud. We'll take all of the profits out of it. And none of the men and boys would find themselves in a trap in the beginning. But these groups, they express these highly emotional charged statements like, oh, but you don't want to believe all women. I was like, no, absolutely not. I said, I believe in the evidence.
Hey, you said something that I want to go back to, man, because I don't think a lot of us are aware of this. It was almost like a light bulb went off when you said this, and I definitely want to spend some time on this. If I'm hearing this correctly, you said that DNA can be actually, or I'm kind of referring to what you said, that DNA can actually happen during the 8th week of pregnancy. Did I hear that correct?
You absolutely heard that correct.
Now, let me stop you 1 second right there, Carnell. Sorry if I'm interrupting. Okay. It's amazing. It's amazing. This is what's truly amazing because I'm sure 95% of the world think that you have to wait till after birth to do DNA testing. Yeah, 95%. Yeah. So that's like a hidden piece of information, knowledge that's been locked away, stored away, and not really talked about or not exposed to. And that to me is utterly amazing. Because you look at the modern world itself, we almost can really have automobiles that autonomous automobiles that can ride without no one driving. I saw something today where they're gonna have taxis pretty soon that roll to your house. You can actually buy a taxi, a $30,000 taxi. You sit inside, you and your guests, and it takes you wherever you want to go. It's your vehicle, it's your personal taxi. So if we live in a world that can do that, and we're talking about all these potentials, and we are flooded with news media that talks about everything, bring everything to the forefront. Why hasn't this been brought to our attention? And to me, you can stop a lot of this foolishness long before you get down to the courts and everything of that nature. If when someone says I'm pregnant, or when she says I'm pregnant, and there's a potential dispute, 8 weeks in, this is what we should be doing. So just, if you have an answer to it, I'm just curious to understand why is that hitting from the main public?
Well, you are quite indeed a perceptive one. And as such, you might find yourself catching a little heat behind what I'm about to say. I love heat, next.
Man. I love heat. I love it. If you give me a chance to be cold or hot, I'm going to be hot. So I love heat. Come on, let's go.
Well, I'll say this: if you're going to take the role of being a person willing to speak out for men and boys, you either develop tough skin or you pack up your ball and go home. And look, I've long since been out of the system. I'm in this because I'm hoping we can inspire more, specifically men and boys, to become advocates for men and boys, even in their other areas of vocation. But let's talk about why this is not constantly talked about in mainstream media. It is not, listen, it is not because the bioscience industry is not interested in this. Specifically across North America, there's more than 45 accredited laboratories who are qualified to do legal parentage type testing. And that's specifically in the area for maternity, paternity, and immigration services. And one of the reasons I know so much about this, Mark, is that um, after I got my own DNA test that revealed that I was a victim of paternity fraud, I contacted the lab that did my test, and I told them, I said, you guys have a problem here that I would love to help fix. Here's the problem. I said, not enough people know why this should be done, and it should be done early as possible, so that this scenario that my family and others have encountered, and parents of teenage boys have encountered, is it can be prevented with a prenatal paternity test. So back then, there's two types of prenatal tests, Mark. There's one that's called an invasive prenatal test that involves you having to get a doctor, and they have to use a long needle to draw the amniotic fluid out of the mother's womb where the baby is. And that test is much more expensive than what I'm about to tell you about the other. You could probably look at a couple $1,000s involved there, because you got to bring in a licensed doctor to do it, right? And the mother is going to have to be monitored. She's going to have to come to the office, and doctor, nurse, probably an ultrasound. They got to make sure that where they're going to pierce the womb, that it's not near the baby. And what they're looking to do, Mark, is they're looking to extract fetal cells. And out of those fetal cells, you can get enough DNA to be able to match up with the mother, match up with the alleged father. And then you can conclusively say, in most cases, whether or not that man and that woman are related to that child, right? There is a small risk in that area of the invasive type test that the mother could lose the baby. So based on that, I refused to offer that during my years of service as being an international service provider of those DNA tests with the company that I was with. All right. Then, say within the last, 10 years, they continued to advance on the technology, Mark, to develop a non-invasive legal prenatal paternity test. And here's the difference. With this non-invasive test, all they have to do is, starting at the 7th week, is draw blood from the baby's mother. And you need to have it collected by, once again, either someone who is licensed to draw blood. Doesn't have to be an MD. It can be a nurse, medical assistant. It can be a physician's assistant, whoever, right? But you need a neutral third party who's not related to the mother or the father to draw it and do what we call proper chain of custody, verify the identity of the person sample that you're sending in. And once they have that blood sample, I recommend it be the 8th week. Is by that time, Mark, you have fetal cells, which means the baby's tissue cells are actually in the mother's bloodstream. And using the various extraction techniques, they can extract DNA for the baby and for the mother out of that blood sample. And then all you have to do next is do a epithelial swab, which is a cheek swab on the inside mouth of the accused father. And you do like 4 swabs on them, and then run a double-blind test. And Mark, at the end of that double-blind test, you're going to end up with either 2 test results that says he did it or he didn't do it. If it says 0% probability of paternity at the end, Mark, he didn't do it. And since we now have the readily accessible means to determine who the father is before the baby is born, I make the case that it's in men's and parents of teenage boys, it's in their best interest to get the truth as soon as possible to determine whether or not he should be involved up to the birth. If you got the facts at 0% at the 8th week, I'm recommending that they send her on with the people she had her fun with and let them be responsible from that point forward.
I see why the heat comes, man. I can see why the heat comes. But I wanted to tour for a little while. I'm going to come back to the distractors and basically the pushback that you receive. I want to come back to that in a little bit. But here's something that I'm hearing with this, and not only this section when it comes to paternity, but there is a motion and a thought process in society to protect women at all costs. Now, I understand we're to protect them from harm and danger. I get that. I totally understand that. And there's a lot of things go into that and go outside of that. But I don't understand when an organization that, for the most part, can look at something as simple common sense, and then you move away from them to a judge, he could be male or female, that literally feel like you're punishing or damaging someone that's fraudulently doing something. I don't understand, and I want to speak on that a little bit because this in
Mm-hmm.
this in the world that we live in, let's get real.
Mm-hmm.
They're protected even when they're wrong,
Mm-hmm.
highly wrong. There's a badge of protection, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why that they can walk around, do whatever they want for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
sleep whatever they want, pick and choose who their daddy is, whatever the case may
Mm-hmm.
be.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, they can run through the court system and find a level of guarded protection. How does that exist? Where does it start? I'm not, you know what? I'm not that
Mm-hmm.
concerned where it starts. I want to know why it doesn't exist. I
Well,
just don't understand it.
I have an opinion on that one. Wouldn't surprise you that I'd have an opinion, but I'm going to say there was a day and a time when, especially when women and girls didn't have equal status, equal rights, and equal opportunities, right? And I'll say that the feminist movement did produce some great results in respect of women can vote, right? And women can apply for jobs, and women can go to college, right? And uh, they can pursue even some areas of blue collar and white collar positions that they could not before because they were discriminated against on the basis of gender, right? But now, if we're going to advocate for true equality, Carnell Smith and those like minded say that true equality also demands equal responsibility and equal accountability. So, with that in mind, we have to almost counter a form of a chivalrous attitude by some of the male judges that believe it's their job and duty to protect the women and the girls from the consequences of her own actions. Let me say that again for the audience way back in the back. They have this uh, mistaken belief or darned blue pill belief that they should be protecting the women and the girls from the consequences of her own actions, not the actions of someone else, not the actions of the man or the boy that she may have very well made a false allegation against, that she should be minimized on being punished or receive consequences for her own actions. I think that sets a bad precedent because some people, if they don't receive consequences, they don't ever learn to not do what is wrong, unjust, what is unfair, or what is evil. Okay. Now, counter that with female judges. My experience between female judges and female attorneys is that I find a lot more of them are have a low tolerance for BS from women trying to come in and emotionally manipulate the court or manipulate the environment by trying to use their feminine charms and feminine wiles to take advantage of a situation by using emotional manipulation tactics. I'm so brazen as to recommend guys that, hey, if you got a situation you're involved in and trying to untangle yourself in a divorce from a radical feminist wife, man, you probably want to have a bulldog female attorney. And when I say bulldog, I mean someone's going to be tenacious and aggressive in representing your interests, and she doesn't care about the other side crying. She's going to hold their feet to the fire based on the facts, and frankly don't care about the other side's feelings. Because if the other side is willing to do what we call shaming tactics, that means they attempt to shame, insult, guilt trip, and they have this incessant need to be right, even when the facts, video, audio evidence prove they are lying through their teeth by a country mile. It is such that we're having to now teach men and boys, you got to be careful of who you're involved with when that person is inebriated, drunk, or in some kind of altered state of consciousness because they're on drugs and alcohol. See, my advice these days to guys is, if you know she's a person that participates in those substances and things, you need to leave her alone. And if you can clearly tell she is not in all of her senses, you got to exit yourself away from her rapidly, right? But the old chivalrous mindset, I tell the judges when I've had a chance to speak before a judicial legislative body, is their position says they're supposed to be triers of fact. They don't have a duty to protect someone from the consequences of their actions, whether it be male or female. They should be there as an arbiter of truth and justice. And according to the law has to be impartial. And I, as an advocate, legislative advocate, shouldn't have to remind the judicial branch of that.
I want to take this a little further in a sense where, because, before we get to the pushback, when I hear you say the LGBTQ was part of the, where they were defending women, and my mind goes, why? Why even showing up? Because realistically, you're not with a man. So realistically, how does that play into what you're about, what you're speaking for?
Mm-hmm.
So it almost seemed like they just came along for the ride just to gang up against men.
Mm-hmm.
And some of this here I'm hearing is that's what it comes down to. And don't get me wrong, men have done some horrible things to women over the years. They have.
Mm-hmm.
And I I don't never overlook that, condone that.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, you're dealing with what's in front of you. You're not dealing with what happened maybe 200 years ago. You're not dealing with what maybe happened 50 years ago. You're not dealing with what happened 10 years ago.
Correct.
At some point, the reality is you're dealing with what's placed in front of you. Mm-hmm. So to me, when you have some of these groups showing up, such as them, you're not looking to have children anyway. You're not pregnant by a male. So why are you here? Why are you there? Basically to show what? To show what? Don't talk about support. That's solidarity.
They're there because they were band together, and the sisterhood code is believe all women because they said so, and do everything you can to suppress any evidence that will counter that narrative. And that's where they draw fire from me.
Yeah, that right there is enough right there. That right there is more than a mouthful. And the word accountability, come on, who believes in that anymore? Now, you have been placed in a lot of venues where I'm sure such shows you were on in the past, numerous ones. I'm wondering, most of the time, they knew you were coming, did they take someone from the opposite side, LGBTQ, or did they take a radical feminist organization just for basic conversation, just to have an opposition, or were they really trying to get to the truth of what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, in actual honesty, that has happened a few times. I'll say this, like with a radio interview where they actually wanted me to come into the station, right? Mark, I knew I was walking into hostile territory. And they had a belief. The host was a female attorney. The entire production staff there were women, and up until probably about the first 10 minutes, did it dawn on them they had completely mischaracterized and misjudged me. They thought that I just advocated for men just because I'm on the side of men, whether men are wrong, whether the men have committed all manner of heinous crimes. And I was like, that's not the case. I'm
Hmm.
on the side for what is truthful, what is fair, and what is just. And that is irregardless of gender. And I will go so boldly as to say, it doesn't matter to me what your gender is, your age, your sexual preference is, any of that. And Mark, by the first break, they changed their entire position on me and started asking me how to help male family members of theirs and friends of theirs, because it dawned on them they were wrong, and they had their own implicit bias that because I was a man, that I was on the side of men regardless of what men do. Now, Mark, I believe you and I share that. If a person is evil, I don't care whether you're man or woman, you should be punished for it if the evidence can prove that you did it and you can be charged with it and convicted of it, then you need to feel the fire and the consequences from it. But should that person be persecuted because of their gender or because of their race, age, sexual orientation, or etc.? I say no. And then we take it to a television show. I actually did a television show with one of my clients. Can I name the show? Because it's
Absolutely.
on the
Feel free.
internet.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I actually did a show on the Dr. Phil show with one of my clients. He's a MD. I had did the DNA testing to prove that he was not the biological father. And the opposition against me was a feminist attorney, Gloria Allred. And Gloria's position is that the woman is always right, no matter what. The woman's always right. And Mark, I recommended her because I knew one of her clients had committed paternity fraud. And I also knew that Gloria's position pretty much was that, well, it doesn't matter. That, well, if the guy had been paying the child support, he should still have to pay. And I said to Gloria, I said, well, the woman, in my client's case, the woman having an affair with her coworker, with a man of a different race, the baby turns out to be the coworker's baby, and she still wanted to collect child support from my client, who was on staff at 2 hospitals. He was a teaching doctor, so this man's training other doctors, and she would make substantially more money out of sticking it to my client, who was the doctor, than from her coworker, who was like a high school counselor. I said, now, how was that fair and just to make the doctor responsible for his wife cheating on him? She didn't forget she wasn't married. You can't tell me she suddenly had a lapse of memory and like, oh, she fell on this other guy's um, apparatus and ended up pregnant, and it was an accident. I was like, you can't sell that. You couldn't even sell that to Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles, right?
Look out now.
At the end of the show, though, we end up having a live debate on the stage, and according to the audience and according to the security team there, I won that debate. And at the end of the show, she said, you should go to law school. I said, thank you. That's a rather high compliment.
Oh my goodness. I'm drinking a glass of H2O here, man. I'm gonna lift this up to you, my brother, because Gloria Allred, I'm not saying nothing negative about her. You see her coming. You see her coming, and what you just went through is what you basically see coming for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
It's loud, abrasive. It's not about right. It's
Mm-hmm.
about money for the most part. Just make sure I get the most I can, no matter what took place. And a lot of men in that situation would have backed down. A lot of men
Yeah.
in that situation would have found a way to kind of basically be passive.
Mm-hmm.
You stood tall. You stood very tall, and you stood with the truth. and
But
you
that's
never
what
can
I
go
said.
wrong with that.
We should, Mark, because
Absolutely.
the truth doesn't need props.
No, no. But in saying what I just said, she's used to, I'm sure, she's used to most of the times if that's the MO. If I come in, I'm this, and I say this, and I'm loud, I'm this and that, some men will just kind of turn their back, okay, you won. It's not about winning per se, but that's what it seemed like it would come down to a lot of times when I see her in
Hmm.
a situation as such. So no,
Hmm.
I mean, I can only imagine. I mean, I've heard you spoke of. I can imagine on some of these shows, or sometimes when you're out there, all over the years, that some of the pushback that you came across. Did it
Hmm.
ever get to the point where they started attacking you personally?
Yes, 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 yes. So, during the course of me lobbying to get the state law changed, the opposition found that they didn't, after a while, they didn't want to show up to any more committee meetings or subcommittee meetings or when I had televised press conferences. See, I learned some tactics from Dr. Martin Luther King is never debate your opposition in private. Let me say that again. Never debate your opposition in private. Always do debates with your opposition publicly with as many radio, TV cameras that you can possibly get. Because listen, if they actually have a position that has validity, I think they should be heard. On the other side, if what their position is crazy, ludicrous, and they're actually propositioning for taking advantage of people just based on gender, and that in this case believe all women and we shouldn't do any DNA tests. Well, she said he did it. That should be enough because we need to protect the women and the children. So here's what I did, Mark. I've got the women and the children who were affected by paternity fraud, because when you take as much as 66% of that guy's salary, you affect the kids who live in his house that are his. And you also affect his wife, girlfriend, or fiance, right? I got the opposition on our side to attend a public conference, a public televised press conference, and our side outnumbered their side, Mark. And that was
Hmm.
tactical. That was strategic. I wanted to show the media that this was not men against women. This was truth versus lies. This was evil against good. This was right versus wrong. They're like, but why do you have to be so black and white about it? I'm
Hmm.
like, because this is what truth and justice demand. You said you wanted equality. I'm saying I am more than willing to hold your feet to the fire. That equality demands equal responsibility and equal accountability. If you can point at somebody and claim they did something to you or they caused you some harm, and the evidence comes back and proves not only are they innocent, the evidence, independent, incontrovertible evidence that can be verified by neutral third parties, that you have falsely accused this person and you knowingly and willingly withheld material facts, you should have consequences for it. And no, you don't get to hide behind your XX chromosomes and go, but because I'm a woman or because I'm a
Hmm.
girl, believe all women. Now, Carnell Smith says, absolutely not. Believe the evidence.
I want to. I'm going to take a little small break, and I'm going to come back, and I want to approach that statement right there. Believe all women. That right there is oh my goodness. Do you love podcasts? Ever thought of creating your own podcast? What are you waiting for? Get started at podup.com. Podup is one of the sponsors of this podcast, and they would love to someday sponsor yours. Starting as easy as creating an account at podup.com today. Podup has everything you need to run a full professional show with over 35 different tools with AI integration. Get a 7-day free trial with no credit card required and 15% off with the code when Black Men Talk 15. You don't have time to start a podcast? Check out podallies.com. Get a team of podcast professionals to do all your website, social media, and editing work for your podcast. Pod Allies is an agency run by the folks who built the Pod Up podcasting software. Get started with them at podallies.com. Getting 15% off when you sign up today at Pod Up or Pod Allies with the code When Black Men Talk 15. Pod Up and Pod Allies can't wait to create with you and launch your own podcast. I don't even know how that come out to where I'm trying to. If I think I would search every book in America, I don't know if I would find a statement right there. Believe all women. Believe all women. Now, as you said earlier, you're speaking to where someone you and I both would basically go on the basic truth matter, and gender to me never determines what's right and wrong. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
If a guy doing something wrong, he does not get my support.
Yeah.
Nothing. I'm not going to battle for him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to act like because he's a man, he deserves some special type of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
No, we all live and fall on our own sword based on the choices we choose to make and the things that we do in life. So I'm never going to be the point where I'm going to say something stupid to where believe all men. It doesn't make any sense. So to me, when you have a group of society that can utter such foolishness,
Mm-hmm.
believe all women, especially when you take that into a situation of a courtroom or when you're basically trying to find equality.
Mm-hmm.
What does that belief have to do based on equality? I don't understand it. And that's what I was saying earlier about the feminist movements and the feminists and all the other stuff. If you want equality, it just can't be for you.
Yes.
It's not something that you have a patent on. So if
Yes.
that's what you want, realize it's equality across the board. It's just not for you to go home and drink your little hot chocolate and think you're the only one deserving of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that statement alone, I don't know who coined it, but to me, to think that you have any legitimacy when you can walk around and say believe all women
Mm-hmm.
is I'll leave it there and get your reaction to it. But that that right there is a firestone. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Believe all women. Did we believe Eve? Did we
No.
believe her?
No. And you hit the nail right on the head there, Mark, because you and I share that common position. If we're sitting on a jury, we are absolutely not going to believe all men just because we're men. And as a black man, I am not going to believe all men just because of his skin color.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to give a preferential treatment. What I will say, I am willing to be open to hear all of the evidence. You with me? And I'm willing to suspend judgment and use critical thinking and let's evaluate what is the allegation, the charge, what is the evidence, what does the law say, and now can we come to a conclusion as we blend that all together and using critical thinking skills. Not because I hold my finger in the air and go, hold on, which answer is politically correct? Oh, well, believe all women. Well, why? Well, because she's got XX chromosomes.
Oh.
You can't sell that one to me. But now I acknowledge that there are good men and there are evil men. I will acknowledge that there are good women and that there are evil women, which is why you'll never get me to make a blanket statement such as believe all men, believe all boys, believe all girls, or believe all women. No, because I know, depending on what we would refer to as a self-serving nature, given a situation, some people will absolutely lie and take advantage of the situation. And if playing to an audience that is more favorable and more partial toward your gender, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, or whatever it is going to be something that will be allowed to be superior above the actual evidence and the facts and the truth, we have a problem. The facts, the truth, and the evidence should trump feelings. It should trump whatever the genetic profile of the accused and the accuser. So with that basis, and I having done several, public speaking engagements and et cetera, most people, including the feminists, have been willing to change their position when I presented them with one question, Mark. And here's the one question: if it were your husband or your son or your grandson that was falsely accused, and you had the evidence in your hand that proved he was innocent and he was on his way to jail or prison, how long would you be quiet about it?
Hmm.
Immediately after that, a whole bunch of feminists changed their position, because now I forced them to have to walk a mile in my shoes and in the shoes of the falsely accused. All of a sudden, then it hit home to them that gender preference and gender superiority was not a right position, because when it happened to her loved one, then she started to use critical thinking.
Carnell, I want to do this, man. I want to take another show we're going to do, and I want to focus more on the men in this aspect, because we have to be more diligent, more critical thinking of who we're sleeping with. And just because she walks by and she looks good and
Mm-hmm.
she smells good,
Mm-hmm.
we have to start thinking and feel different. And our younger men must kind of take that mindset on,
Mm-hmm.
because, and I understand the part of fraternity,
Mm-hmm.
but as men, we need to do better in that area,
Yeah.
because for what I can understand and what I see,
Mm-hmm.
we're putting ourselves in situations that's causing a lot of this foolishness and
Well.
giving her opportunity. And I'm not blaming the men, I'm not blaming the women,
Mm-hmm.
but I think if we make better choices sometime as men,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't push ourselves to do that
Mm-hmm.
as men, we just basically, if it feels right, we want to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't necessarily work much anymore. So
Well,
we'll take a show. Sorry to interrupt, but we'll take a show where that'll be the primary focus. I'm sorry. Please continue.
no, I'm going to agree with you, but a lot has to take place that the older generation was supposed to teach the younger generation. And a father can't teach his son something if he's not allowed to interact with his child. And to a great degree, at least in the Black community, a lot has taken place to more or less make it advantageous to where when Black women have in a large way have chosen to take financial aid from the government over having a husband or having a child's father involved, to where, like, well, hold on now, if I get more money based on having more babies, some based on the low hanging fruit, some people will pursue that option. And then when we don't have coaching and mentoring to teach the men and the boys why it's advantageous for them to not have any children outside of them getting into a committed monogamous relationship, preferably marriage. If he can learn that early and make sure that his seed doesn't go out with just anybody, then we could do something to put a huge dent in the single parent household, the single mother household. Um, I'm a big advocate of asking the men, like, don't rely on her for birth control. You need to take account of, because she's spending your money.
Hmm. Yeah, that's going to be a good show, man. That's going to be a real good show, and I'm looking forward to it, because I feel that's something that has to happen too, because a lot of times we're getting in situations that we could have basically avoided, and and we're going to deeper details in that show, to kind of laid it out, but bringing it back to what we're really conversating about today about, and this is, to me, it seemed like it's way in the background when I hear them say believe all women and this and that, and they did utter protect the children. But how are they trying to protect the children when they're coming against not trying to find out legally and realistically who the father is? How is that protecting the child?
You ready
How did
for it?
how did they kind of explain that to you? They're trying to protect the child.
They're not willing. They don't want to answer that question, and they do not want to be asked a lot about that position publicly. Remember what I said, strategically, I never debate opposition privately. Strategic move, Mark. So you got to ask the opposition to make a case for how does a child that is not that man's child have a superior claim to the assets of that man above the children who are actually his children, and he didn't legally adopt the kids with the knowledge that they weren't his. He has either been intentionally lied to or accidentally lied to be in this position. How do you skirt the responsibility of the mother of that child as the one person who always knew she was involved with multiple people during her window of conception? And if she does not disclose that, Mark, to that guy, to the accused, then she is knowingly and willingly hiding material facts. And in my book, she should be prosecuted for legal fraud. But our opposition, they don't want to answer that question. So what I do is I just counter with them so nicely and say, when should the man ever be responsible for children that are not his, that he never agreed to support with upfront knowledge that they were not his kids? Unless you could show me some formal adoption papers where that person knew up front they weren't his, then he should pay. I'll agree. If he participated in assisted pregnancy, in vitro fertilization, they used a sperm surrogate, they used some of the other assisted pregnancy techniques, and you had that man's current consent and knowledge at the time of the procedure that he agreed to do that, then that guy is not a victim, Mark. That is with his knowledge, that is with his consent, and with his full participation. In those scenarios, Mark, that is not a man taken advantage of. So you have to, in my humble opinion, you have to apply some critical thinking and not take the emotional bait when they try to throw you a red herring and say, but what about the children? And I'm like, well, the man has zero. I say the man has zero responsibility for children she went out and had with other people. In fact, we should be holding her responsible. She knows how many other men's names should be on the list, and she should be working with you till you test them all, till you find out who is this kid's biological father. She was woman enough to go out and have the fun that led to creating that child. She should be woman enough to help participate in identifying who she had her fun with.
I'm raising my glass of spring water again to you, boss.
Hey, can't you hear it in my voice? I'm all about equality.
I hear it, and you're right, because there's a price to pay for playing. There is, and I've seen personal situations, not in my life, but in others' lives that I've been around, and sometimes they have said, "Well, I don't know." You don't know who you slept with around a certain period of time. You have no idea. Now, I'm not going to try to call you a name realistically, but you should have a general idea. If we can kind of backtrack the months, subtract, go back, I don't care how busy you were, you should have a general idea. And it's just amazing to where when that happens, sometimes, the mind in their head goes blank, selectively goes blank. But if you're really thinking about the child and trying to protect the child, how could that be? How could that be? Because,
I said, you're going to love my response to that one.
I'm waiting on it.
All right, Bart. First, oh man, here my lawn guy coming by. So please excuse me.
That's cool.
Driving by. I will say this, Bart. I am also going to hold accountability. First, before I address this, is the guy who says, she told me she was on birth control.
Oh, here we go.
I shouldn't have to pay child support because she told me she was on birth control. And I tell him with all sincerity, but sir, if you prevented access to your royal serum, she couldn't have got pregnant whether she used birth control or not. So therefore, you still share in responsibility. But I will say we shouldn't automatically believe you're the father because she said so. We should say you're a potential. So next step is we should verify her claim. And how do we verify her claim? We do a legal DNA paternity test, preferably with all three of you. With that test, we're going to prove that it was your sperm that caused the fertilization of her egg, or it was not. You are the biological father, or you are not. She told the truth, or she told a lie. Like, but darn, man, you're being black and white again. I'm like, well, man, don't blame me because the truth can be that, like that cut and dry. But Mark,
Yeah.
I've had
Mm-hmm.
clients, situations where I use my formula that I developed in my book, Trapped by Law. I call it the ABCs of paternity. And based on this, I developed this formula, Mark, based on my interviewing a couple of obstetrician gynecologists. And I said, well, there's some critical information that men and boys don't have when they are alleged and accused of being the father. And absent getting all of this information and a DNA test, they're in an extreme disadvantage to potentially be taken advantage of, being duped and defrauded. ABCs of paternity. A, what is the age at birth when this child is born? Most people, Mark, think that a
Mm-hmm.
full-term pregnancy is 9 months. And most people are 100% wrong, because including me. And the obstetrician gynecologist told me, says, no, sir. A full-term pregnancy is 40 weeks, 280 days. I was like, oh, snap. That means everybody who thinks it's 9 months is going to be off by 4 weeks. Because, Mark, on an average, 40 weeks is 10 months. See the difference?
Yes, sir.
And most times the accused man or teen boy is not going to know that information. Well, how old is this baby at birth? Is this baby 40 weeks at birth, 42 weeks, 36 weeks, 33 weeks? Because, you start going before 36 weeks, they tend to declare that baby as a premature birth, a preemie. And in such cases, those babies tend to need a little extra TLC. And in some cases, they may have to stay in the neonatal unit for a period of time, right? But Mark, I've seen cases where woman, she delivers a baby that's 7 pounds and say 10 ounces, and she tries to tell the husband or the boyfriend that the baby was born early. Mark, a baby that big, if anything, that baby is born full term plus. Okay. So age at birth, remember it says age, the ABCs of paternity. Age at birth. Most men and boys don't know that one. And the mother ain't going to even know the answer to that one unless she's been monitored during a pregnancy by her gynecologist team with an ultrasound, where they're closely tracking the progress of a pregnancy. Or she knows for sure that when she got pregnant, it wasn't you. It wasn't the accused. B, what is the birth date of the baby? Well, out of all of the information I'm about to provide, the most reliable piece of information there is B, birth date, because there are witnesses to what day and time that baby was actually born, whether by C-section or actually transverse the birth canal, right? You got the obstetrician, you got the attending nurses and any other staff there. You might actually have an anesthesiologist there if she needed an epidural or something for relief during the contractions, etc. I've been through it, my brother. I've been through it. And I've seen a team of probably no less than 4 to 5 people there. So all of those people saw that baby being born at this date, at that time, and that's what gets put on the birth documentation. that guy can trust that one, because now it's not being relied upon just on the mother's word. Now, C, the conception date. When did her egg get fertilized by a male sperm? I did not say the accused guy's sperm, did I?
Mm-mm.
So just because she said, well, you did it, that is not 100% true, when I've had close to 40% of the people I tested through my company worldwide, including military people who were deployed out of country, including a 3-star general, turn out to not be the dads. Then the mother's telling us about what she feels in her heart and what she believes, and how could you question me? Well, Mark, when you put all 3 of those dates together, that date information, age at birth, birth date, conception date, he's not going to know the conception date unless he was there when she first got her initial appointments with the obstetrician, and they give her a projected delivery date, right? Because it's an estimate based on what? Information that she told the doctor, right? Instead, I've had obstetricians tell me, said the mothers try to change the delivery date, or to try to get them to change their estimate to make the date line up with the story she told the guy she wants to be the dad. Because she is not going to tell her husband that at her bachelorette party she was with one of the male strippers. She ain't going to admit that, Mark. And I'm just saying, and she's not likely to tell her husband she was with his best man the night before she jumped the broom. You hear what I'm telling you, Mark?
Treacherous.
So when we combine that age at birth, birth date, and conception date, I tell the men and the teen boys, I said, now that we got this information, let's plot this on the calendar. We go plot this out on the calendar, and now we have the window of conception, Mark. It's the conception date plus 30 days and conception date minus 30 days. So, Mark, anybody she had relationships with within that 60-day window could be the child's father, because oftentimes the mother doesn't get pregnant when she thought she did. And based on that, I'm advocating that we should just do the prenatal test at the 8th week or at birth, because we're not going to get 100% of the mothers to tell the truth in the beginning, because she has a selfish motivation. If she knows her husband would kick her out because she had relations with several members of the bridal party or several of the male strippers at her bachelorette party, just the fact that she did that alone, the kid might end up being his, but he ain't going to keep her. So she's not going to volunteer that information. So rather than us ask the mothers anything now, if we made it standard practice, we always test. We'll make sure we get truth on the baby's birth certificate. We'll make sure we send the right babies home with the right mom and dad. There'll be no more baby swapping at the hospital. And if they did get swapped, we would catch it right away. Look, we'd catch it in the first week of them leaving the hospital. Now, because I take that position, they say I am advocating on weaponizing DNA against women. I won't accept that badge.
You know, it's there's something about the truth, Carnell. It's something about the truth. In my mind, and what I've seen, and I'll stick with the paternity, it's not respected, it's not seeked, and it's definitely not wanted. It's not wanted. It's just not. Because to me, if you're saying you want to protect the child, you want to do both parties, not just one. We want to basically make sure this child know who's the father, without a doubt. That child may have medical issues down the road,
Yes.
linked to the real father.
Yes.
You just forget the financial aspect.
Yes.
So you want to know. You should want to know. You should have an earned interest wanting to know if you
Yes.
truly are trying to protect the child or protect the children. So it should be more than a slogan. protect the child or protect the children. It should be more than that. There should be an action. There should be an energy, a process. So I'm 100% with you that realistically, of the eighth week,
Mm-hmm.
and you said this prior and you said it again. If it's not done the eighth week,
Mm-hmm.
before any
Mm-hmm.
birth certificate is signed, a
Mm-hmm.
DNA test should be done.
Yes.
DNA test, and that's now disrespect to. We all live a life. We all do different things. There's no
Yes.
disrespect, but
Yes.
let's be right about it.
Yes.
Let's be absolutely correct and let's be right and let's deal with it. Let's stop trying to hide what happens years
Mm-hmm.
ago and this and that and who's this and who's looking at me and think about that because we ain't got time for that emotional car
Yes.
wash. We just don't.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
when children's life are at stake. Not when
Yes.
they need to know basically who's their father and that father to be part of their lives. So
Yeah.
it's amazing how it gets turned around and it gets turned into a big salad
Mm-hmm.
simply
Mm-hmm.
because the truth, as I said earlier, it's not wanted,
It's
it's not
not
respected,
respected and it's
it's,
not wanted.
it's no, and it's not seeked, and that's amazing. And it starts there, and like any lie that's told, it continues to grow. It
Mm-hmm.
gets watered, it grows, and
Yeah.
it blossoms. Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
your thoughts on the truths, and we're kind of at this point, kind of
Okay.
wrap things up. But I want to
All right.
finally get your final thoughts on the truth.
I'm going to agree with you. The truth is often not respected and not wanted because of what the truth will reveal. Because the truth will reveal sometimes that the man has lied. And one of the ways that some men have tried to skirt paternity, Mark, is they claim that she was with his friends, his
Hmm.
cousin, and his several of his buddies, etc. Right? And and rather than take the paternity test to prove the guy wrong, not too often the mother is her feelings are hurt over being questioned about the test, Mark. And I've actually had to sit down with some of the moms, like, when they met me on site at several of the courts in metropolitan Atlanta. And I said to them, listen, if there's only one possibility of who could be the child's father, all my test is going to do is help you prove to him that you were right and that you didn't lie. And then you could hold that test result in his face and says, I told the truth. And you get to wear that as a badge. And this topic never has to come up again because you have independently verifiable proof that he caused your pregnancy with you.
Hmm.
Now, when positioned that way, you got to get some people to get past your feelings, Mark. And it takes
Mm-hmm.
someone who is willing to be calm and rational and look, and you can't use an elevated voice with them or cause them to feel like they're being talked down to. I'm saying, listen, you get this done now, it will help you secure and protect your child's rights for inheritance and a myriad of other benefits to have this question resolved now so that you can then put legal protections in place on behalf of the child based on this evidence. Mark, that just completely blew the minds of all my opposition right there. Like, what? You were actually trying to help a mother? I was like, yeah,
Hmm.
because I'm on the side of truth, you nimrods. So truth is often not respected and not wanted because it can hide facts. It can cause people to be uncomfortable at looking under the rock. And I say the adult responsible thing to do is that we don't run from the conflict, because if the best interest of the child is what we're looking for, then we want that child's family medical history to be based on the people who were involved in creating the pregnancy. We don't want it to be based on what the guy feels or what the mother feels. Um, Mark, this may sound crazy, but I actually had one of the moms when we had to test multiple men to find out who the child's father was. When I gave her my ABCs of paternity, she refused to give me all of the information on the ABCs of paternity. So we tested one guy who she really, really wanted it to be. I found out this guy was engaged and about to get married to somebody else. And she was hoping that these test results were going to blow up his wedding plans.
Mm.
That's evil.
Yeah,
Because
very.
she hadn't even told him that she was pregnant until she
Yeah.
found out he was about to get married. And he didn't lead her on from what I found out. It was a short-term relationship, if you get what I'm saying.
I totally get it.
Mark,
Yeah.
Mark,
Yes.
that result come back and it wasn't him. And she started questioning the science and the technology of the DNA test. So I say, well, who else could it be? She said, well, there's someone else, but it can't be him. We test that guy, and sure enough, it wasn't him. So now we're getting to guy number 3, and now she's willing to sit down and pay attention to what I said about the ABCs of paternity, and she looked at the 60-day window. What did I say? Conception date plus 30 days, conception date minus 30 days. Guy number 3, who she absolutely did not want it to be, he's 99.999, something like 4 billion to 1. And there ain't that many people on the planet. It's him. Mark, she is pissed at the test results. She does not want it to be this guy. Listen to how she had determined which guy was the child's father, aside from her trying to ruin the first guy's wedding plans. She had determined who the father of the child was based on sexual performance. Guy number 1 had gave her a 12 out of 10 performance. Guy number 3 gave her a below 5 performance.
My goodness.
And I explained to her how idiotic that was in trying to determine who her baby's father. I said, anybody that you were involved with during that window of conception could have been the dad. I said, listen, based on your refusal to answer my question when I first talked with you, is there any possibility that it could have been somebody else? And you know what she said? Yeah, there would have been somebody else to test. Mark, you can't blame the advocate who's just trying to help the men and the children get something that they don't get today. They don't get 100% of the truth. They don't get it at all times, even though it would be in the child's best interest to rely on medical history, ancestry, financial benefits, sometimes Social Security, legal protections, other things that would be available to the child. So in getting it established as accurate as possible in the initial round, like the prenatal legal test at 8 weeks, this would have never come up later for here we are testing a 5 or 6 year old kid. We could have answered this question a whole 5 years earlier. And that's why I advocate, Mark, that it should be done as standard practice. And by the way, Mark, my advocacy has been somewhat persuasive that there are now family court judges that agreed with me. And as a matter of policy for that county, those judges instituted that for all cases that come before them and the guy, there is no established legal father, step 1 is order the paternity test.
There it is.
And as high as 80% of the people who got tested turned out to not be the daddies.
Good gracious. Man.
So,
my God.
So I'm saying the men and the boys, you can't blame them when those test results say he didn't do it. I'm not trying to shame the mothers. I'm saying, look, if the mothers are out having more intimate relations than the guys are, you got to know that this thing can happen. And that is a direct consequence or correlation to what we call cause and effect, right? If you do these things, saying that you can do everything that men and boys can do, you cannot exempt yourself from the consequences.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the other show, Carnell. I really am. It's amazing, though. I mean, it's amazing. 80%. It's just those numbers are mind-boggling, mind-boggling. And I guess it shouldn't be. When I look at the current day life where we live and people are living, it should not surprise me. It's just not. I wouldn't think that the percentage would be that high. But I want to thank you for coming by again. And I'm looking forward to the next one when we get a chance to basically go a little deeper. And we'll turn the spotlight on the men a little bit more as we didn't do on this one. But I want to get your last word again, man. Appreciate you coming aboard. And let me stop this. I want you to also let people know how to get in contact with you because your knowledge, man, your knowledge is, woo, is super deep. So once again, let folks know how they can reach out to you.
Sure thing, Mark. Thank you very much. I'm honored
Hmm.
to be a return guest on When Black Men Talk. I am Carnell Smith. I am the paternity coach. I help women, men, and families address family identity issues, and I do that by helping them use DNA testing, law, and advocacy. Because there are many times that you may end up needing to prove who you're related to, and those situations can be far reaching before birth, after birth, and in some cases even after death. I'm Carnell Smith, the paternity coach. You can find me at thepaternitycoach.com. Thepaternitycoach.com. And until the next time, we shall talk again.
Sounds good. Folks, always appreciate you giving us an air. And as you said, we're going to do another show, hopefully many more shows beyond that, because this man needs to be heard a lot. Well, thank you for giving us air once again. God bless you, and we love you as well. We'll talk to you soon.